question that you have for a VC that you want to completely non-bullshit answer on?
So that was Eric, the co-founder of Hustle Fund. They're an early stage venture capital fund based here in San Francisco. They've invested in over 350 top startups. And you're about to watch the live pitch between Eric and Hoa in Silicon Valley. Okay, it's technically in my garage, but we are in San Francisco.
My question is, will you invest?
Meet Hoa, the founder of Feather Robotics. He's worked at Google, Apple, and also founded multiple startups. So Feather is a robotics company that's flipping things on its head.
Why don't we work with a lot of customers at the early stage? Our focus is how do we build the right form factor for people?
So we're first going to start with the pitch, and then we're going to get the behind the scenes take from Eric, the VC. But in the pitch, look for these three things. So first, make it simple for VCs by putting yourself in a box that they understand. Second, sell that big vision and not just the product. I think Hoa did an amazing job of focusing on where they're going and the overall opportunity and not getting bogged down in the details of robotics. Finally, show that you can sell it. The best way to do this is through letters of intent. VCs love that, and it really helps de-risk the investment.
So walking me back 7 years ago, what was that inspiration that sparked that said, I kind of want to spend my life doing this?
I left my job at Apple. I always knew I wanted to create a startup. Reading everything, going through a bunch of papers, going through a bunch of industry trends and seeing what is the next market that's going to approach us. That's the biggest market of our time. Once we start automating labor and we have general purpose capabilities for automating labor.
So is there a specific use case that your robot right now is really targeting as maybe your first use case?
I want to caveat our company versus specialized companies. We sell to other companies that does the integration. We provide the hardware that allows you to integrate into these different verticals.
Let's say that I have a small assembly line, right, where there are some repeatable tasks that right now are being served by humans. Would the ICP, the intended customer then would be the business owner like myself?
Depends on what kind of company you are. There's companies like PGE where they might have their own innovation team in-house that are looking for systems to deploy. And Amazon has their own teams in-house that look for a system to deploy.
I'm trying to search for maybe a different analog. One that comes to mind is a Taiwanese company called MediaTek. So what they do is they're kind of the component suppliers to Google Home, Amazon, and so forth. So is that getting towards what you're doing?
Help me understand as a VC why the comparable is so important to you.
I think what's coming for me is I'm not that smart. So I'm trying to use, I think, basic analogies of things that I might be able to understand. Largely because I'm not a hardware investor, this is very new to me. So when it's explained to me in middle school terms, which is probably, then it's helpful for me to understand a new industry a little bit better.
That's why I love Eric. That kind of humility is amazing.
Closer to a company like Apple. So when Apple first started, they just got a bunch of components and they built the computer, and they didn't actually build the software onto a computer. It was sold to hobbyists, but it was actually a bunch of third parties that were writing third-party software that made it useful. And a good example was a company called VisiCalc, which created spreadsheets. And spreadsheets made it useful across the domain. But you needed this hardware platform to automate information that allows you to kind of automate physical labor in a lot of general purpose applications. And then I would say the second company that's closest to us is, have you heard of industrial arms?
Yeah, I've seen that before, yeah.
Yes, so we're very close to an industrial arms manufacturer, such as KUKA, Universal Robotics, and they don't actually at some point in time, they stopped doing the integration themselves and they just sell the arms themselves. And there's a bunch of companies that build around their ecosystem.
It sounds like there's two components to this business, or at least how he produces product, right? Yeah. So the first would be the robotic arms themselves. The second would actually is the software layer as well, right? Because once I receive them as a vendor, I want to be able to train it on some sort of repetitive action or use case, right? So what's the software layer like right now? How are you powering that? That actually seems like the more differentiated part potentially.
We realize that everything starts with the hardware solution first.
Okay.
And we can sell the hardware solution by itself because there's enough customers that have the software capabilities to buy the hardware layer. And then as we build a reliable hardware layer, we can start adding piecemeal different software tools on top of our platform that makes the integration costs, that brings down the integration costs. And I can kind of walk you through a roadmap of hey, where we find the biggest value adds to the software layer.
Maybe before we get into that, I want to talk about the gorilla in the room right now when it comes to all things hardware. So this is the stuff that generally scares me away as a software investor, is that physical atoms are physical atoms that need to be shipped and moved, right? So there's a new administration that is producing a lot of volatility around things like imports and goods and raw materials and things like that. So it sounds like you're building an American company here, which is amazing. I think we should have great American hardware industries, but it does also sound like some of the components likely are going to be sourced from overseas. So with some of this volatility, how do you sort of work that into the model in terms of the volatility of the COGS and so forth?
You have to have contingencies, and you have to design for contingencies. And I think something that's special about our system is we have a very modular system. So if there's like an arm that needs to be replaced with a different style of arms because that arm can't, like the components for that arm comes from China or something like that, then we can substitute those parts. And we actually did a very thorough analysis of our entire supply chain so that we know that, hey, if we have to resort to these contingencies, maybe the cost comes up a little bit, but we can still ship a product. And if anything, we get more leverage because all of our competitors' products actually go up as well.
Have you ever thought about building this company in Asia? Because, you have places like, we're just talking about how much we love Vietnam. And, there are a lot of government programs to subsidize hardware businesses in like Da Nang and other really cool parts of Vietnam. And also it's a really great thoroughfare to get to China, which is the largest robotic market right now. And other places too that are theoretically tariff-free.
I think that's, we can kind of like look at the car industry as a good example. And we've seen car industries that built purely just in America and car companies that built like a hybrid where they got some supply chain from China and they built in America. And then there's car companies that's global. And what we found is the car companies that built just purely in America all failed. And what's the best approach is usually the hybrid approach, where you can do like part of your production in the US, you can do part of your production globally, and you can probably spin up like assembly lines throughout the world to service that kind of like sector of the world.
Yeah. Well, let's rat hole on this for a little bit here, because I'm actually a huge car enthusiast, and I like to study this industry. So complete vertical integration within the United States, you're saying that that's a failure. Would you say that Tesla is a failure?
Tesla, if you actually saw the Trump tariffs, Tesla was not fully integrated in the US. They were having trouble actually getting enough car parts from China. So they do final assembly in the US and they do produce a lot of parts. So you can always increase the percentage of parts you produce in the US. And I think that's actually very strategic to kind of like, hey, we can start like producing like metal parts in the US and we can figure out what's the parts that's very difficult for us to do in the US.
Yeah.
But then the stuff that's easy for us to do in the US, we should probably move to the US.
Like this notion of like economy of skills, like specialization just tends to happen within regions, right? So like if China or Korea, let's say, is leading in like battery technology, then, they're going to be wins that sort of focus and win that battle. China might be winning on like nanoscale, like fabrication, or Taiwan is doing that. I also don't buy the idea that like you should be doing everything like Henry Ford did, which is like raw materials come in on one end and then like a car comes out the other in 5 minutes or something. That's I think we're kind of past that stage. Yeah. I'm also kind of curious to understand how you think about your sales motions right now. So you're selling B2B.
Yeah.
And you're a young startup that's just getting going with some pretty cool ideas. How do you approach some of these vendors? Because I imagine my stereotype, at least, of like hardware vendors is that they're relatively conservative. They want to have like stability in their partnerships and so forth. So what does a young upstart do to sell?
I think that sometimes it's actually okay to start small, and you don't need to go, because what we realize is we only need to sell 100 units in the next year to reach $3.5 million in revenue. And that allows us to build a very strong foundation.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this? So 100 units, 3.5 million. You're selling these for 35,000 a piece.
Yes.
And then is there any subscription to this, or is it just a one-time fee?
Currently, it's a one-time fee. We make about $10,000 in profit per unit we sell.
Okay. So 25,000 in, I guess, fully loaded expenses, COGS, and things like that. 10,000 profit. 35,000 machine. Again, like I know that you're building kind of an Apple system here where anyone should be able to plug in with like these kinds of needs. But again, like is there like a perfect industry that you think where you're just like, there's so many vendors in this space, specifically auto manufacturing or whatever?
So I see two main areas that there's a lot of market opportunities. One that's not penetrated at all yet and the other is a easy to grab fruit right now. So one of the easy to grab fruits right now is like machine loading, because a lot of times there's like a bin over here.
Okay.
People can't afford like a conveyor belt to move parts from that bin.
Sure.
So you need something that's mobile to grab parts from the bin, bring it to a machine to stamp or to stamp the part, and then put it in another bin. This is a very common task where there's like 6 stamping machines. This is the perfect application for our use case, because if you were to automate it in any other way, it would cost like $100,000 at least for the machinery alone. And most companies cannot afford that for that task.
Okay. 35,000 a unit. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the sales motion part of it. So my bias, I'll just share my bias up front. Like, I don't represent every VC. I almost care more about founders who are as good, if not better, at selling and distribution as they are at building great products. Now, this is actually much more of a software perspective, because I think in software, I think we're starting to get to a point where I assume pretty much anyone can build great software with these modern tools. But the selling and distribution part of it, I think that really begins to differentiate yourself. So let's say that for this manufacturer that has a use case for like moving different components from one place to another where your robotic arm is perfect, who is the buyer within that company?
So usually there's two people that you have to sell to. First is, most of the time you want to work with a manufacturing integrator, and you want to teach the manufacturing integrator how to
Is that like a value-added reseller?
So usually they resell your product.
Yeah.
They have the connections with all the factories in the local area, so they know that, hey, these are all the requirements that's currently not fulfilled by, like, all the manufacturers want these tasks automated.
Okay.
And then they also have advantage right now. A lot of manufacturing integrators, they're competing against each other for bids with the same system. So they have a strong incentive to actually adopt new systems that can have new capabilities for their portfolio. And getting early adoption allows them to build brand image or brand recognition around this area.
Yeah.
So this is why there's actually a strong incentive for manufacturing integrators to work with us at an early stage.
How much validation do you want for a deep tech tool like this?
Do you consider yourself to be a deep tech company?
I would say we're like a hybrid, you know what I mean? Because a lot of our work is we're commercializing what's already ready. And we have a very interesting go-to-market.
Yeah.
Right. But then we're accumulating more stuff into our technological moat and our patents. Does that make sense?
Sort of. I don't consider you a deep tech company at all, because the reason why is like, I think the horizon for when you get to market is way faster.
Yeah.
For me, like a deep tech would be something like drug discovery.
Yeah.
Like the 3 of us are going to create like a cure for COVID or something. That could take like 15 years. Or we're going to send a rocket to the asteroid belt and then like get some diamonds. Like, that's cool.
Let me ask you a question, okay?
Oh no.
What if, sorry,
So good.
let's say the company will eventually send rockets to Mars, but they have a step-by-step monetization plan and a step-by-step product roadmap that isn't as risky to get there at every single stage of the way. And that's closer to our company, because eventually, if like 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to be producing robots that can kind of like do almost anything, like be your plumber, and if you were to think about it, that's a deep tech company fundamentally. But in the short term horizon,
I think you could build on for sure the deep tech use cases. So like in the asteroid mining case, like why not have like a robot that's you make, right? One of your arms to like, drill into an asteroid for sure. It's interesting though, because like when I was sort of thinking about that use case, I also think of, well, there are like bolt-on components that sort of like create the entire system. So example would be like, I consider the ceramic manufacturer that puts the heat shields on a spaceship. Like, is that like a deep tech company or not? Like, there's definitely some very technical molding and like, proprietary ways of doing this kind of stuff, but it's also like ceramics. And so like, it's kind of a hard one for me to grok. I'll have to process that one a little bit more.
You asked about the subscription too, which I thought was every VC loves to have the hardware. If they're going to do it, they put the subscription on it. But like, can you tell me more about that question?
I think behind that is a little bit of a low-hanging fruit in terms of where this business could go. So let's say that you sell me $3 million worth of robot arms. I can imagine that there's servicing that needs to take place, make sure that I'm lubricating the arms properly, or making sure that there's not going to be any critical failures. So it's a technician that needs to be trained there. It's one of the things I kind of like are when there is an initial sale and then some expectations of like a services contract thereafter, where you come in every 6 months or 1 year. while that's labor and you have to actually send someone over to do that kind of thing, it can actually be really, really lucrative, right? On the software side of it, like take an example of like Oracle.
Yeah.
Their software is really bloated and really difficult to use. So what they've done in the past to make a ton of money is actually the services contract, which is like Adam runs an enterprise. And then I just sold him a bunch of Oracle software, an ERP solution or something like that. But we're going to provide like a solutions engineer that comes in for the integration, but also like as his company blows up and, gets into like 10,000 employees now, like that's going to need to change the software a little bit. So my solutions engineer is going to come back and help you with other kind of support and things like that. And it's been a lucrative model, at least in enterprise software. But something like this where with physical atoms, like I also think of just components depreciating, breaking down, and those are actually opportunities as well for like services contracts, I think. So it's just a food for thought, and that there's kind of maybe something that's very SaaS-like in what you'd be producing here too over time.
And I think that there is one really good opportunity is as you add onto like your developer API or your software layer, then you can charge per hour if that task has never been done before and you're the only solution on the market for that.
Okay, I dig that. So I kind of like the fact that you put me in the hot seat too here. Is there like an unhinged question that you have for a VC that you want to completely non-bullshit answer on?
I love this. This is why we do this. Thank you for that question.
My question is, will you invest and why not if the answer is no?
I'm generally really uncomfortable with anything hardware. Yeah. We've done some things in the past, but first and foremost, like our team and me have built all of our careers on software. So it's something that we just really understand better. The second thing here too is just like I have no idea how like hardware sales cycles work. So like I don't have anything to add in terms of value there other than maybe I know someone and I can make an introduction. I think the last thing is this, and this is going to be like the due to ignorance. Because I don't study the space, I've actually seen so many robotic arm companies approach us. And we never say yes to any of them because like we actually don't know anything about them. But because of the commoditization of at least that pitch, that's something that needs to be overcome a little bit. Now, what you've done pretty well, I think, in even this conversation, is make the case for like your vision of the platform, right? Like over time, this should be as easy where, if we're going to be providing the arm and then there's a software layer that you can interact with to basically program it to any use case, and it should be pretty chill. And maybe we're getting to the point where we can just even prompt this thing of just like, look, like cell phone here, and then move it 1 foot to the right every time. Like if we're rapidly moving to that level of like prompt-based, like even training, which I think we are, then I can see this in every house. Why not? Like, why not put the dish in the dishwasher, right, over time? Like, just from like a retail use case, but from like the manufacturing use case, I think that's super cool. But there are clearly many steps along the way. The last thing I'll say is this, which is the problem that I've had with hardware generally in the past is that it is more expensive to underwrite in the beginning. So as a small fund, when we only have like under $50 million per fund. The problem is like we only write 2 checks largely into any given company at the earliest stages. So normally by the time like a hardware business has been able to get to their escape velocity, so much funding rounds have taken place that our position has been diluted down like crazy. I'll tell you, like the only hardware business that we ever invested in was a company called Boom Supersonic, right? Like making supersonic commercial jets. It's doing really well. But like when I look at like where our position has been diluted down after all the years of underwriting to produce that plane, it did not make sense.
Did you guys at least make more money, or is your valuation at least higher?
I can't comment on that.
Okay.
But I would just say it does not make sense for us to ever do that deal again.
Yeah.
For that argument, could you not have exited at an earlier stage just by being bought out?
We could have been. And there's always an opportunity to do secondaries. Want to be very careful about that. Like sometimes, like when you're entering the social contract as an investor, the desired outcome is actually to be there till the very end. And so like if we're like hot swapping ourselves out and say like we're getting our money out, good luck. For me, something feels a little bit off on that. And sometimes we have to do that because there's a lot of conditions for why funds at a certain time of life just need to exit. So it's been 10 years or 12 years and like you just got to show some return and you're kind of forced to do it. And we'll have a long conversation with our founder as well before that happens. But I kind of want to be there till the very end, right? Yeah.
It kind of takes away the fun of why you even started the fund.
Yeah.
In a way.
So like for you, like more of like a multi-stage larger fund that can be excited to underwrite across many rounds, I think would be amazing. One that actually has track record in a little bit of deep tech, but more hardware as well, I think would be great. I'm thinking of like a Lux Capital.
Yeah.
Like they're like almost like a dream group to work with because they really understand this kind of stuff and love these kinds of bets. And just be prepared. Don't really know that much about hardware. Are like instantly scared off when the H word is mentioned.
Yeah.
And then that's a little bit of its own battle. But the thing that does solve all this stuff is actually money. So like if this is where if I were like your head of sales, I'd spend a lot of time is like I think this is a product and a compelling enough vision where you can begin to pre-sell this stuff. You just say like, look, put down $1 million now for a $5 million order. We will deliver it within X period of time, like 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, right? I do think you could do a lot of pre-selling. And if you came to a VC saying like, look, I have like several $1 million in pre-sales even before we actually ship this thing, you won't have any problems at all. Everyone's going to be throwing money at you, right? So there is like a bit of an order of operations you can do to just like make all of the counter arguments just disappear. It's just ring the cash register.
I think that's a good point. Like there's different stages in which you're building the company. One point I do want to mention is, do you think that we're just building robotic arms right now? Just to clarify.
I think you're building and shipping robotic arms, but with a programmable platform on top of it where the vendor has a lot of discretion in terms of being able to make it work for any use case that's relevant for them.
Okay, so we're not building just arms. We're building a platform on wheels that has a telescoping lift and 2 arms on it with like kind of like a head. So kind of like the idea of the form factor is something that can do most of what humans can do today, but not as limited as an arm. So I just wanted to...
Your website looks really good too. So like it has like a really nice demo of that like skinny like object that's like doing that kind of stuff too. So it's I think that part is very good. I guess like here's like a last thing to think about in terms of like other funding sources. I would actually go really heavily into CVCs as well.
CVCs.
So those that actually have these kinds of use cases. Like I'll give you an example. Like one of our investors from a previous fund is called Far Eastern Group. Really cool, privately held, family-run conglomerate, really large in Taiwan. And they own a ton of commercial spaces and shipping ports. So, like, if you took investment from, like, a group like that, and you said, like, look, I want you to be our first client, too. You have, like, all these, like, shipping containers or just, like, de minimisly small goods or something that you need to move. I can see this thing just rolling around in all of our shipping ports, just doing things like that. That could be really good. The other thing, too, would be, like, an insurance company. So, like, one of my favorite statistics is... the most common injury in a warehouse comes from forklifts because people are actually just driving those things like maniacs and they're extraordinarily sharp. So if you're just like, look, you have a lot of insurance, like you almost do like an actuarial exercise. So like you, Hartford, whatever, have like $70 million in payouts for like forklift injuries a year. I can reduce that to 0 by producing like this robot that's cheaper than forklift that can go around. And like it's going to completely remove like any of this risk, right? Like, so can you help me as a B2B seller, like sell this to your commercial spaces and then also invest in my fund and my company too. So things like that could be kind of interesting.
I'll let you guys kind of like debrief. And it was really great. It was really great chatting with you. And
to be super clear, I really want this to work and win. The most important question, hopefully this does get in. The most important question that any investor needs to ask at this stage, at the early stages where you are, is what happens if everything goes right? What happens if everything goes right with your vision is that I don't think it stops in just like businesses and commercial spaces. Like this is something that should be in every home.
Exactly.
Right? So like that I think is so ambitious and crazy that I would be delighted to see like $1 trillion business that you're creating where like, you know, my aging parents have someone to help lift them up, right? Like if they're at that point or just anything that requires like any physical labor that has the slightest chance of risk of injury for me, right? So that's pretty cool. And $35,000 as a starting point. Yeah, that sounds expensive, but this thing is going to get cheaper over time with economies of scale. I just figured this out. So if there's like a $5,000 robot I can have in my house that does all this stuff, and I'm like almost prompting it like, hey, Alexa, like pick up this thing, you know, that is ridiculous. I mean, that's a crazy vision. And it's so cool.
That's what I want a VC saying about me. Hoa just left And now Eric and I are going to go under the hood and unpack in depth what he actually thought. Yeah, so Eric, I'm going to just call it the elephant in the room on my side, which is I brought in a hardware founder that you're typically not investing in. Most VCs that I talk to, they've all been burned with hardware.
Something that I really do admire about Hoa. So, I gave him all the pushback in terms of why hardware is difficult, and he understands this stuff. And there's that saying that either Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett once said, which is like, if you want to make a lot of money in business, you have to be both contrarian and right. And the thing that I'd like to recognize in a founder is it's fully possible that Hua's vision is the absolute right thing right now. The fact that he's doing the harder business versus doing AI software or whatever's hot right now or Web3, I really admire that because it takes an extra level of courage. I'm rooting for him. I do hope that this works out great for him.
I think that is the tension. The traditional advice that you get from a VC is always going to be skewed to the things that are currently working. As we start to dilute the market with more of those things, we're missing the real massive opportunity.
You're right. Like VCs are a lagging indicator. The last time I actually ran a company was in 2016 as a founder. So like, what do I know? But I will say this, which is, as I was listening to his pitch and the answers that he had, and I thought they were actually pretty good. And I am quite confident that he's going to find some investors who are excited behind this vision. Like that, for me, that's 100% true. The thing that's a bit unfair for someone like Hoa, and actually unfair for any founder, is I've learned that you can have a very good reason for a glaring issue for saying no 100% of the cases. Like there's no perfect company that like completely nails their pitch at this stage because it's pre-seed seed. It's just too early. Whether you're making software or hardware, it doesn't matter. Like if you're going to say no at that stage for this reason, you're 100% right for saying no at that time. But again, we need to always ground ourselves on the key question as early stage investors, which is what happens if everything goes right? You need to give yourself a little bit of grace or give that founder a little bit of grace and give yourself a little bit of permission to dream alongside of them. And when I think about his company, again, the conversation that we had towards the end was about how this could literally be in every single home. It's like just seeing the form factor, thinking about even like my aging parents, thinking about the stuff that even I have to do physically around the house, just like the retail use case of that. I'm like, I can 100% see this. If it were affordable, not $35,000, but like a lot less than that, why not, right? And then in the commercial use cases, I'm like, every single commercial use case can have a robot like this thing too. So there's a lot of barriers, yes, in the beginning, but does he seem like a smart enough person that can overcome that? And could this have like a multi-trillion-dollar market cap someday as a business? It's conceivable it could, right? So I guess the lesson that I have, just like for any VCs who are listening right now, or angel investors, is again, the last question you have to ask yourself is what happens if everything goes right? And that vision for what he has painted is pretty amazing.
Tell me how you evaluate the team.
Missionary versus mercenary. So something that I was trying to needle into a little bit in the beginning, which is like, why hardware? What sparked this? And I think with a little bit more time, I could get more of that story. I want to be able to back a missionary founder. So let's talk about what this means. A mercenary founder is one that's in it purely to chase cash. There's nothing wrong about becoming a founder because you want to get rich. That's fine. But I do have some problems of just like, I'm agnostic. Like Web3 is hot right now, and then AI is hot, and then who knows, drones are hot. Like you just tend to just like chase where the money is because you think you can just like get your bag. Right, that's one kind of founder. I call them mercenary founders because they're a little bit agnostic in terms of what they're building. They just want to get the maximum outcome, and some people do it well. I like missionary founders. Like a missionary founder generally has something that ties to like their early life or like early career that ties to like, this is why this is a theme I cannot shake. An extreme example of this is we're investors in a great company called Uncommon Therapeutics, which is an unusual deal for us. So this guy is using AI to create treatment protocols to cure or mitigate rare diseases. And the reason why this is his mission is his daughter has one of these ultra rare conditions, but she's like in the top 1% of quality of life right now because he's used these AI tools to figure out a protocol to serve his daughter. And now he wants to serve our daughters and sons with this kind of a platform. For me, I'm just like, how can you bet against someone like that? Because like what's at stake is serving his daughter, right? Like that's a mission for me, right? So I didn't quite get that level of extreme mission yet from Hoa, but only because in this format didn't have time to really dig into like why robots, like what happened in childhood and all that stuff. And I think I can sense that this is a little bit more than a mercenary thing for sure for him. There's some mission behind this, and that's something I would spend normally more time on.
And that gets you excited because it's like, are you saying that they're bought in even if the economics don't work out in some way because it's just a deeper?
I think it's a little bit more simple of an emotion. So after having been a founder for 5 companies, you start to really realize that it's mostly depressing. Just being a startup founder 95% of the times is terrible. And then the 5% of times where it's really great, it's like existentially great. It's like, God put me on earth just to solve this problem. Like I have stars have aligned behind me in the universe. And what I find is that with missionary founders, because it's going beyond just, I want to get rich, it's more of just like, I need to solve this problem that I think is just good for the planet or good for the world or good for society or even just good for me and my family. It tends to be one of those connective tissue thingies that just allows you to pull forward during the hard times, which is like, even when like everyone doesn't believe in you, you're out of cash or you're almost about to die on your company. Like, it's just like this thing that keeps on driving you forward. It just like kind of the ether that kind of pulls you forward in the universe. And I think that's what it takes to get through those dark moments, because there's going to be an endless amount of dark moments in the startup journey.
Oh, that's so good. And I'm glad that more and more founders are talking about that. And like, even like you said, depression, I know I've felt that at times. I felt that when I was a founder, and people just feel like there's not space for that. Yeah. When it's just, you look at the TechCrunch articles, you look at the LinkedIn cool things that are happening, and you're like, why isn't this me? And I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, it's sort of like watching TikTok or Instagram as a child, right? Like you start to condition yourself into thinking like everyone's life is better than your own. But like our startup founders also have a version of this here too, right? Like if you look at X or Reddit or, TechCrunch articles and so forth, the narrative when I was a founder 20 years ago, like when people ask like, how are you doing? The standard response should have been crushing it. All right, that was like the term of the many years. But now we're in a better spot where I think the emotional intelligence has risen in Silicon Valley, where we can be a little bit honest. So just like, it's been a really terrible month. Like I lost like my biggest client or something like that. I'm trying to recover from that. But because of this environment, I tend to find Silicon Valley people are really good about withholding judgment, trying to pay it forward with like great kinds of things like that. So what I really credit Hoa about was like, this guy looked like a guy who was very emotionally intelligent too. And that to me tells me that when he's going to need help in his journey, he's going to ask for help in the right way. And he just seemed to be someone that takes feedback so well. So that made me even more bullish about him.
I love that takes feedback well. I know that was when I was a VC for a bit. That was something that all the partners always pointed out was like, are they coachable?
Yeah.
And I know that can, as a founder, it's kind of like, what are you trying to like mold me into this thing that you're trying to make me? But I also understand like, if you're not willing to take feedback from wise people around you, then that's at least a yellow flag.
Well, there's some subtle things that he did sort of jibe back at me, which I really like as a founder. So he, in very kind ways, I think was implying that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not a hardware investor, and he's 100% right. So it's almost like a combination. The Venn diagram intersections are just like a little bit of humility and enough lack of ego where you can take the feedback well, but a slight bit of fuck you attitude too. To say like, hey, you don't get it. I see it. And it's okay if right now I'm the only one that can see it because I'm just going to do it and then show everyone else, right? So that intersection right now is Hoa. And I think he actually navigated it really well. But when you index too much in one or the other, which is like, oh, like I'll only defer to what the VCs say, that's terrible. Or if it's like, oh, I don't care about what anyone has to say, like that's also terrible in a different way too.
Oh, I love that intersection. And you can't be on one side 100%.
I think the best ones are intersecting to some degree. Now, the question is like how much overlap or not, right? And
how long is like an average pitch? And what did they have to do to get there? And then what do you do after that meeting?
I'll tell you, it's really easy with Hustle Fund at least. 25 minutes is the pitch. It's usually on the phone.
Not Zoom?
I like phone better. And there's a reason why is actually implicit bias. So this is hard for people to admit, but like if I saw Adam on Zoom, I'd be like overwhelmed by his beauty. And like I'd just be like, oh my goodness. Like, people like have like stupid biases like that actually, right? So when I listen to the ideas, it just allows me to focus on the ideas a little bit better, right? So I prefer phone, but that's not 100% rule across our team anymore. I'll make a decision on the spot at the end of 25 minutes typically. Usually it's either no, and here's the reason why, or it's yes, and then here's $150,000, and here are the terms I suggest. So why don't you think about it? All right. And then usually after a few days, they'll say like, okay, I'll take it, or no, can we go, whatever. And we'll have that little discussion, and then we'll wire that Friday.
That has got to be one of the fastest cycles of any fund.
So speed, I think, is the theme for at least my career in terms of being successful as a founder. But I think this is also the key to building a really good reputation, is that like if we view ourselves, and Hustle Fund's really trying to push ourselves as like a services model for founders, like we're in the service of our founders, not the other way around, which is what I felt as a founder. Then if we follow up really quick with decisions, we're decisive, but also we're ultra responsive along the way after we invest, then we'll earn the right, I think, to be long-term partners, put in more money if it makes sense, whatever, right? And that I think is like the lowest bar that we have been able to cross pretty successfully, that very few VCs ever did for me as a founder. And even now in this industry, they're slowest.
Like, how can you get a decision that quickly?
Let's sort of talk about the framework there. So there's only 5 parts to what we think about at the pre-seed stage. So our investment shop, Hustle Fund, is focused on pre-seed stage investments. So we're usually the first investor, maybe after mom or dad. So angels are our typical co-investor. So we're testing for 5 things: team, problem, solution, market, traction. Team is, do they have relevant skills and experiences in shipping products in this industry? If they're co-founders, do they have a history of working together? Something that shows that like they've overcome some sort of stress together, and like just like there's some sort of real longer term relationship indication that it could be healthy for the long term. The problem, it's not enough to have a great problem statement. I want to understand like the customer discovery around it. Like show me that you're a missionary behind this. Like, did you talk to like 100 customers or just one? If it's like closer to the 100, I get more excited. Just like, you don't really talk to 100 people about like vaporware unless like you're very excited about what you're building here. That's a mission around the problem. Solution, any early prototype that I can engage with and take a look at. It can be terrible looking. It usually is. But if you can give me a sense of like, why did you prioritize these early minimal viable product features, and how are you going to grow from here? It gives me a sense of like your product judgment here. The market has to be big. Can it serve a big venture backed return where all of us make a ton of money? And then finally, traction. I don't really care as much that you have like $1 million in revenue yet. Like generally no one does, but it's a clear sense of the go-to-market strategy for how you're going to be bringing this thing out to the market. Like, what are your current theses and so forth? I would say that this is one of the most common misses of founders. A lot of them are really focused on the product, but they put a lot less thought in terms of the marketing and go-to-market, the traction there. So if those 5 things exist, then we're ready to write $150,000 investment to your team. 99.3% of companies we see each month do not hit all 5 of those appropriately. And only 7 out of 1,000 that we do see do. So we do write investments in about 7 companies per month out of 1,000 that we see each month as well.
Wow, that's a low percent, but like that's just the challenge. Can you help me with each of those 5 really quickly? I'd love to know what a perfect statement is in each of those categories.
Okay, so let's talk about team.
Yeah.
Relevant skills would be great. So let's say that you and I decide, hey, we got this great startup idea, venture capitalist. Adam and I are going to cure COVID with 1 pill. Literally just take it once and you're done. We've cured the disease. And then the VC might be like, oh my gosh, this is a multi-trillion-dollar market. You've saved the planet. All right. And then they're like, okay, so Adam, Eric, tell me about your backgrounds. I'll just mix it up. I'll say like, well, I got a degree in marketing from like whatever university, and Adam was a PR agent at like another industry or something like that. And none of us have clinical sciences backgrounds. All right. So you can start to see like a real massive mismatch of just like, they have no freaking right of doing this. Or another one could be just like a marriage of convenience. It's like, okay, like we're pitching ourselves to VC. Like, how'd you guys meet? It's like, well, I met him at Starbucks at a hackathon last week, and now we're going to spend the next 20 years building this company. I'm like, marriages of convenience don't work. Right. So a perfect answer for this use case would be like, we're going to solve COVID with 1 pill. And the way that's going to, and let me tell you about who we are. So Adam actually has a PhD from Harvard, and then he worked 15 years at Genentech on the virology lab as like the senior virologist on that place. And I was actually someone on his team, me as the co-founder, for the last 10 years, and we actually shipped 3 blockbuster drugs in the virology space, right? So at that point, it's just like check mark in a big way. It's just like, this is awesome. This team is so relevant, and they've actually shipped stuff together, and there's longevity in the relationship. That's like 80% of the investment decision, by the way, right there. I think is just like the team, because at the pre-seed stage, there's no data. So you're just making a bet on the people. All right. Real quickly on the other elements here, problem. Again, I don't care about problem statements. I want to know about like, what is the customer discovery behind it? It's sort of like when I was a college student, I was like applying for consulting jobs. They're like, McKinsey or whatever are going to ask you like these case studies, like how many light bulbs are there in America or something. And the interesting thing is like, they don't care about the answer being right. It's just like, what is your thought process for how you break down this problem? I like seeing that, and also just understanding how it ties to like, did you talk to a ton of people? How obsessed are you? Like, and does it tie to any personal mission here too? All right. So that uncommon therapeutics problem statement, just like there's a bunch of people with rare diseases. No one wants to touch it because there's no money by pharmaceuticals, but AI allows me to go after each of these diseases one by one in a very cost effective way to cure these diseases for desperate parents who just want to cure their kids. Right. I'm like, that's amazing. Right. What a mission. Solution. Again, just show me your prototype. It could be Figma's at this point. But something that just gives me a sense of like, why did you start with these initial set of features? The market, spend some time to talk about like, to map out like why this is a multi-billion-dollar minimum market for me, where, if we can invest, we can see 100x on our investment. That's actually the threshold that we want to see, is like at the post-money valuation that we invest in Adam's company, do we think that someday he can 100x it? So if I invested a $5 million valuation and you sell to Google for $500 million, for me, that means you're essentially a fund returning outcome just from that single company alone. And that's something that a lot of VCs are thinking through, is like, can I return my fund? Meaning, can I give all of my initial investment that my investors have given me back, just one single deal, and then get into this profit sharing mode called carry, which is unbelievably lucrative, where I get 20% of the profit and you get 80% as my investor. So that's like where a lot of VCs make a crap ton of money. And then traction. Again, like, very, very clear and succinct perspective on like, what are the go-to-market channels you're going to put this out to. We had a discussion off camera about letters of intent, about like, if you're pre-selling, you have like pieces of paper indicating like, hey, they're actually kind of in our pipeline and actually put their signature to something. Those kinds of artifacts that show that you are passionate about the sales and distribution as well is something that is, I think, a lot of software investors like myself in particular are very biased towards, because I think that building great product is becoming really commoditized. But excellent sales and sales processes is something that I think will be the differentiator over time to get your products out there.
The last question is, what is the biggest thing that keeps you up at night as a VC?
Venture capital is completely antagonistic to founders in many cases. Let me give you an example of this. So, how are we measured? How do we know we're doing actually a good job? Because like, if we invest in your company right now, Adam, like, you're not going to get your return for us until like 10 or 12 years. Like, it just takes a long time for you to IPO or sell to Google or whatever, right? Sometimes it happens sooner. That's cool. We're often measured in our industry by this concept called TVPI and IRR. TVPI being total value to paid in, and then IRR being like internal rate of return or something like that. So basically, these are paper markups, meaning like, I invest, let's say, at $1 million valuation into your business, and then you raise capital 6 months later at a $10 million valuation, and then you raise capital 6 months after that or a year later at like a $50 million valuation. I could say to like a investor later, or sorry, one of my LPs, a limited partner, which is investor in funds, saying like, look how smart I am. I invested at $1 million valuation and now we're 50x. Right? Let's take away dilution, all that stuff. Like, we're 50x up because I'm great. So why don't you now, in big like Stanford endowment, give me $1 billion to manage? This is actually a massively structural weakness of venture capital with founders, is that there's an implicit pressure on VCs to pressure your own founders to continually raise, because you get marked up on your position every time that the company raises at higher valuations. And I was forced as a founder to raise too quickly on some companies. And I had no idea, like, I don't want to raise right now, but why are you forcing me to like take this $10 million thing? Like, right, I want to do it. And they're like, no, you got to take it. They didn't explain it to me. And then I realized later it's because there's two ways to make money in venture capital. There's the hard way, which is I invest in a great company like Hoa, and then he does super well. And then all of us get rich. Like, he gets rich. My investors get rich. I'm going to get an insane amount of carry. I'm rich. That takes forever. A faster way to get rich is like, I will mark up my companies super quick by pressuring them to raise as fast as possible. I can show the Stanford endowment or Yale endowment or whatever that like on paper, my investments are growing ridiculously fast. They're going to keep giving me tons of money for my subsequent funds. And then my management fee, which is 2% of the total AUM, suddenly becomes unbelievably good. If I'm managing $1 billion and I get a 2% management fee, that's $20 million guaranteed to me every year for the next 10 years. If I'm a dog investor, I'm guaranteed $200 million. And that is fucking bullshit. Because like what happens here is like basically then you're abstracting your incentives from like the founders. Like you're no longer aligned in really caring about whether they're going to make it big, but you're self-aggrandizing all of your wealth through fees. And I actually now think that the majority of VCs are playing this game because it's easier to raise money for your fund by messing with the metrics than it is actually to work with founders and put in the hard work to see them become ridiculously successful. That's harder.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, sure.
No, like I love your heart behind this, man. And that's why founders just relate to you so well. And I'm not just saying this to be nice, but just like you talk to founders and there's just a lot that speak highly of you. And I think it's just the relatability, the empathy. But anyway, I know it's a fundamental challenge because you're going to have that natural pull. And it seems like they're almost putting the bet on you that you're not going to play the game, as you continue to grow. But
it's hard. I mean, and like, so founders, if you can do your companies without much outside capital, do that. Lean very heavily into angels in the very beginning because they're not playing that game either. Yeah. Right. They're just like, I believe in Adam and like, whoa, it's been like, 15 years and now he's worth $1 gazillion and like he served everyone well. Like that's patient capital generally. And then VC is the funding of last resort. So if you have that high growth business, venture capital can work well with certain kinds of businesses, the right kind of VCs as well. But also use your sniff test to see, are they someone that is, just like I'm typecasting, are they a mercenary or a missionary? It's the same thing in venture. Are they in it because they're actually caring about founders and long-term outcomes and are aligning themselves around that? Or are they mercenaries where you just sort of notice that they're in Davos a little bit too long each year? They're on their boat in Croatia a little bit too long. They have a little bit too many nice sports cars. They're cosplaying VC. Those are cosplayers. They're not actual VCs.
Boom, Eric, man, this is a spicy take. This is the honest feedback. That's what it's all about. That's why I started this podcast.
Yeah, I say this out of love, but now I'm also a little bit angry, but it's mostly love.
I know you have a lot of friends in both categories. Man, thank you.
Yes.
This is amazing. Thank you for being real. That's what it's all about. And that is what this podcast is about. Thank you. Like people are tired of just everything's great. It's always been great. And thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Adam. This is a really cool format. And also big shout out to Hoa. If you're seeing this episode, we want you to win. It's a really, really cool vision. Yeah. And that what happens if everything goes right, if you're correct, is going to be outstanding for this planet.
That's what it's all about. Glad you listened to the end. I hope you got at least one thing that you can apply that's going to make a big difference in your startup. If you want to follow more of this, go to YouTube and search Adam F. O'Donnell, all one word, to follow shorts and future episodes, or go to thefounderinitiative.com. Boom.